All right, welcome to Artcasters, episode 270. And you'll notice that we have a guest. And so, as usual, we'll kind of make the rounds, introduce ourselves, and then introduce the guests. So, you're on my channel. You know where to find my stuff. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the bell, follow Gaz's lovely hand motions to to arrive there, but you don't know who Gaz is yet because we haven't introduced him. So but anyhow, and then I have noticed that the price has gone back to somewhat normal for two stories, my graphic novel about faith and mental illness. But if you're interested in slice of life graphic novels, black and white, hand lettered, hand inked comics, 122 pages, go buy that now. So yeah, that's my stuff. Scott, what do you have to plug?
What do I have to plug? You can go to my website, circworks.com. I have a bunch of stuff in my store, including my comics and including a print that Josh did of Young and the Dead, my comic book Young and the Dead. Awesome print. Definitely go check it out. Very limited quantities. And besides that, go to my YouTube channel and check out Making Comics 101. It is a course, basically a free course on YouTube that will teach you pretty much the basics of everything you need to know about comics from start to finish, everything from coming up with your idea all the way to printing and publishing and all those steps in between. There's about 100, not 100. I'm way off with these numbers because we're at 270 now on this show, but I have about 70 videos. Wow, there's a lot. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. 70 videos in that series. So some of them are short. I mean, there's the basic ones, and then there's like quick tips, and then there's like a sort of a little deep dive exercise. But you can watch all of them, or you can just pick out the ones you want to see, whatever. But yeah, I highly recommend it.
I love it. All right, and then our special guest tonight is the special on Saturday. It's Gilda Radner and the host of Action Activate, as well as brilliant cartoonist.
Ooh, let's not use that word.
Gaz Gretsky. So how's it going, Gazbot?
Excellent. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
I love watching you guys, and I also love participating with you guys.
I'm glad you can participate. That means like you're probably still sleep deprived, but possibly getting enough sleep to not be completely sleep deprived. So we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, I'm functional. I'm certainly functional.
So Gaz, aside from being like a relatively new dad and trying to catch sleep where you can and where you can't, where can everybody find your work? Where can they go buy Horror A4? Where can they get commissions, all that fun stuff?
I'm most places on the internet as Gazbot. That's the name I try to get. So I'm on Twitter, and I have an Etsy store where you could buy my comic, The Horror A4. You could also buy a ton of prints of Godzilla, Power Rangers, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But if you put in Gazbot artist, you're going to find me on whatever medium. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram, all that stuff. Yeah.
Nice. And I would recommend it. Like Gaz just sent a link to like a Kickstarter that I do want to contribute to, that he did a bunch of card art for.
Yeah, that is not, to be clear, it's not my project. It's a project I worked on.
But the art's some of yours, and it's ultra.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Awesome. I could share that actually. Let me screen share.
Yeah, because I kind of want to jump in on that just because it's Ultraman, and Ultraman is great, and the fact that you're a part of it makes me extra want to do it. So.
Well, I agree that Ultraman is great, and I agree that I'm a part of it. I don't want to overstate my inclusion, though. There are a lot of artists involved, and I'm just one of many. But basically, it is. There it is. Okay, so this is the. If you share my screen, I could show it. This is the Kickstarter.
Hold on. Oh, there it is.
There you go. This is the Kickstarter. What I did is I was one of the original sketch card artists. So you can see this one down here, Jiras, that's mine. These are Matt Frank. If you follow Kaiju at all, you know he's like a superstar, and everyone else is just great artists. But it's an Ultraman card trading set that also has like signatures and 3D cards and all kinds of crazy gimmicky stuff. And it's a Kickstarter that just started, I think, yesterday or the day before, and it's already almost at $50,000. So
Sweet.
It's doing pretty good. So I don't get any kickback or anything. But what I did was these cards. These are sketch cards that are in the set that you could potentially pull. of original art. Yeah, and this one, the Giras, was picked as I forget what like a promo card essentially, so you could get it in magazines and things like that as one of it's like a printed version of the original art. All the rest are only original art. And this one down here, you can see this tail coming in. That's actually a puzzle piece 2-part card that Matt Frank did the other half of. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it is. But good luck getting both of those. I feel like whoever gets one, it's going to be a bidding war to get the other, because we thought it'd be fun, but then afterwards I'm like, that's going to be terrible for whoever gets one of these. So
looks like I picked the right thumbnail art then, because I picked the Ultraman. I think it was maybe it wasn't Ultraman.
No, it was Ultraman, Jet Jaguar, and Megalon.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
But so yeah, that's the thing. I actually worked on this like a year ago, but it's just coming out now. And then as far as commissions, I'm actually theoretically wanting to not take commissions right now, except I will take commissions for these Ultraman sketch cards. I have a bunch of artist proofs that obviously I want to sketch and sell. So that would be one thing. If just message me on any platform if that interests you.
I love it. That's cool. Great. So you brought up a really cool topic, just as something we could potentially do on Artcasters, and it kind of worked out, because I'm like, well, we haven't had Gaz on in a while, and that topic is intriguing. So and
that topic is conventions, because I always talk about conventions. No,
exactly. So let's talk about let's talk about licensed art, conventions, like no. Yeah. So why exactly was that? I mean, I can guess, but I'd like to hear kind of why that's on your mind.
The topic of
late.
Politics and religion. Well, I've always thought about this. I don't talk about it very often, but I think about it a lot. And I've been watching your show when I can, and the Artcasters, but also specifically Josh, your stream.
Cool.
Pardon me. And and so there have been interactions in the comments about that sort of thing, and your book, which I just finished, by the way, and it's great. I recommend everybody to go get it. The art's good, the story's good, but like I kind of knew that would be good. The graphic design just blows me away, though. So between reading your book and seeing what was going on with your stream lately and the discussions that were happening there, I kind of wanted to be involved in that conversation, but I also thought about how, as I hate to use the term public figure. I'll use the term public figure not to aggrandize myself, because I have very few fans. I'm not famous, but I'm a public figure in the sense that I am in the public selling my art to some degree. And that's true of most artists. And I often think about how much of my personal views on those two subjects I want to share, if any at all, and how that can affect sales and perceptions. And I'm not even, and do I want to put it in my work or not? But even if I don't put it in my work, do I even want to talk about, so I think about this stuff a lot, because I, like everyone, have a lot of opinions. Yeah. And so I was interested in the way, you're a lot more upfront and open with your religious and political beliefs, I think, than I am. I actually have separate pages. Like, so if you follow Gaz Gretsky on Facebook, that's like a private friends and family kind of page. And then I have Gazbot, which is just art. And I never talk about anything political, but, so I made that distinction on purpose. But that being said, I am aware that in my comic, there are probably, intentional or not, like political and religious themes and views that come forth just because that's me, you know what I mean? And they're going to come out. And it's not like your book where it's specifically about that, but I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling a lot, but that's all of that I just said. That's why I thought this would make a good topic.
Nice. Yeah. I think it's a good topic too, because it is something that I talk about carefully but openly. Right. And then, of course, like at my day job where I'm an art director, and you don't want to be like overly talking about like your religious viewpoint or anything, honestly. Right. And you want to steer clear of like any political discussions like in the workplace. So it's like, in that case, like I stay pretty silent unless I'm asked, Sure. But in the case of my own personal work, I do consider it, and I was a little bit more held back on it. I think earlier in my life, but then again, I'm kind of not, because like I think about my first graphic novel. It's funny, like the first one I did, which was never published, I made as an atheist, and it had like some really hardcore atheistic viewpoints expressed in it, and then the latest I've made as a Christian, and like, the second volume is going to get pretty heavily into that. And so thinking about it is like, I don't know, I feel like I'm measured about it, but I do talk about it a lot in my art and in my work. But it is something I consider a lot, and I do juggle and wrestle with that. And I think Scott equally, I think, wrestles with it, although I think he kind of takes a totally polar opposite tack from me on it. I think. What do you think? What about you, Scott? Like, is this something you kind of think is a ripe topic?
No, I'm actually excited kind of about the topic, but it may be for different reasons than you guys. For one, I don't really talk about politics, and I don't really talk about religion pretty much anywhere in public forums or anything like that. But I've got my own beliefs and things like that. But the other thing is, recently I've talked about the leadership training that I went through and everything, and I've basically what that's led me to is to kind of step away from just troll. What is it called? Not trolling, but doom scrolling and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, and because
for a second I was like, wait, you're retiring from trolling?
Yeah,
no, I don't do too much trolling, but
you don't realize, you guys,
stuff like that, and because I realize how upsetting it is, and it's a weird line for me because I feel so much better when I don't get involved in that. But I also, that stuff is also important. Those are things I care about, so I'm trying to figure out sort of where to draw the line personally, because and it's weird because I have been watching so much political stuff for so long that even in the last 3 weeks, I haven't clicked on one single political, and I never really subscribed to any political channels, but since I watch them all the time or whatever, they'll recommend it. And they're still recommending them to me, even though I haven't clicked on any of them in like 3 weeks. So I'm just wondering at what point they're like, okay, maybe he doesn't want to see
You
this
need to go through and click on a bunch of like cartoons or something one day.
Yeah, well, I do. I mean, I click on other stuff, but it's like, so I don't. It's kind of weird, and it's sometimes it's hard because I see these things and the way people design thumbnails and titles and things. It's like, I want to check this out. What is this?
And it's tough too because I struggle with that as well because I want to be informed and I see something happening in the world that I want to know. But you're right; it doesn't always make me happy. Yeah. And you're saying how you kind of had this long history of doing it. I tend to go in fits and bursts.
Well, that's what it was before, and I'm hoping. But those were just my own decisions, kind of now that. And I've come across a different perspective. Like one of the things that I'm learning in like leadership is everything is neutral. Even the worst things that could possibly happen, it's in a way it's neutral, and the belief that you have about that and how you inform that and how you see it. Like you can choose to curl up in a ball, you can choose to be reactive, you can choose to try to find the good in something bad, you can it's all that kind of stuff, and that's what I'm trying to do more of. So and it's it's difficult because I don't want to just ignore important things, but it also isn't good for my mental health.
I think that's a struggle that we all deal with, especially with the pandemic and everything going on. We've all had more time to think about horrible things and
Yeah, I think I just wanted to highlight, so Corey said there is no politics or religion in art, there is only Zool. And then let's see, we're getting Frank was saying the politics of Ultraman or the religion of Kaiju. And then
there's I see this around at a lot of shows around here. There's an Ultraman, like they have those Jesus candles.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ultraman, and he's given the finger. And I don't know who made it or why, but I see him at all the local art shows and comic shows around my area. So somebody around here makes them.
That's awesome. Those are wonderful. I've also seen Elvis ones that I actually would really want to own just for like the pure kitsch, like a good old Elvis triptych or something like that. It's a weird one to navigate. So it's so like what kind of helped you arrive at sort of separating it? Like for me, I kind of feel like I separated a bit. Like on my Facebook, you guys will know it's like I get pretty political and I'll be pretty blatant about it. That's my personal Facebook. On my Facebook art page, I really only share art. Like I don't do a lot more than just like posts of art or if I'm going to appear on a show. But if I'm going to appear on a show, often it's going to be to talk about my book that talks really openly and vulnerably about mental illness and then faith. And so it's like inevitably that comes up as a topic. And then similarly, like my art, a lot of the times, like, you know, when I was making, like I made an album, and the album was pretty influenced by like the Trump administration and has like these really like blatantly political music videos. And so I'd share those because they were animations I did.
Right.
But it's like, other than that, I'm not going to kind of be hitting people over the head with my politics. But the weird thing is, I don't know if, at least for me, I don't know if there's a way for the kind of art I do to not talk politics or not talk religion or talk that's vulnerable stuff, you know.
That's an important point you're making right there. And this is something that, and you know, we all change it, and my opinion might be different tomorrow than it was today, whatever. But I at some point I used to give my opinions out a lot more when I didn't have as much of an online presence, when I wasn't, you know, when I had a job in art, but I wasn't like a freelancer that was like trying to cultivate, you know, like people that would follow me and like my art, and it, like my personality would affect that, you know, like when I was just working in an animation studio, I'd shoot my mouth off all the time because whatever, you know, I'm getting paid to be here and who cares. But as I started doing stuff, I kind of pulled back because when I thought about the art I do, for the most part, and now I'm doing a different stuff, but for the most part, it's like prints and commissions and monsters and robots and like it isn't political. I mean, everything is political because everything, you know, any choice anyone makes is political, but there's nothing overtly political. I'm not talking about race, religion, politics, any of those buzz things you would think of. None of that is overtly in my work. And so I thought about it, and I'm like, you know, because I read cartoonists that do, I mean, I read your book, and I don't necessarily agree with all your views, but I liked your book and I knew what I was getting into. That's the other thing. I knew what I was getting into. I knew what this book would be. So I wasn't like, well, why is he preaching to me? You know, like I understood what I was getting into. And it's not preachy, by the way, for anybody that's worried about it. At least not the first half. I haven't read the second half. But and so I guess I thought, like, I didn't want somebody to not buy a Godzilla versus the Megazord print of mine because they didn't like my political opinion or didn't like my religious views.
Yeah.
You know, so that was why I decided to separate everything, because any opinion I have can be taken the wrong way and could cost me a fan, could cost me money. And now that sounds very cynical. Like, well, then, you know, I'm willing to sell anybody and whatever. And I struggle with that too, because like, does that mean I don't speak my mind? And in some ways, I think if I was more famous or rich or had a bigger platform, I'd probably be more likely to speak my mind because it would matter. You know, maybe people like, oh, like, you know, like if I was like a Todd McFarlane or something, and he gave an opinion, some people might hate him for it, but it would like really have weight because everyone knows who he is and stuff. For me, it's like I have like 100 people that care who I am. What am I going to alienate 50 of them? And it's not going to do anybody any good anyway, you know? So that's kind of why I thought that. So when I see like actors and people like that giving their opinions on things, and everyone's like, shut up and act. I'm like, no. I mean, I understand that. First of all, they're a citizen of the United States and they're a human being. They're allowed to share their opinion. Just because they got famous doesn't mean they're not allowed to share their opinion. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to not like it and not watch whatever they're in or not support them. That's fine too. Or maybe you could separate the two and whatever, but not everybody can. And there have been artists in various things that I have followed and loved, and then found out certain things about their views or their actions. And sometimes I'm like, well, I don't like that, but I could separate the art from there. And sometimes like, that's so heinous that I can't support them anymore. And I can't even like watch their old movies, you know? So it's kind of hard to watch Cliff Huxtable nowadays. Which is a bummer because I really loved the Cosby Show. I liked the Cosby Show, but I loved Bill Cosby's stand-up. Oh, dude. And so I can never watch the Cosby Show again. I don't care. But the fact that his stand-up is now hard to watch, that's what really hurts. Like, yeah, it sucks. You can't watch the chocolate cake sketch and like, you know, or like, you know, there was a brilliant one he did in the 70s called Bill Cosby on Racism that actually influenced a lot of like way more kind of seedy comedians that was like really kind of consequential to comedy. And yet like, it's like I tried to watch like 5 minutes of it and was like, yeah, but once again, that's kind of something every person has to navigate. And I agree with you. I think the expectation for people to just like sort of not do that, I guess it's different in the sense of like where I work,
I'm in an executive position. And so it's like, I literally there's a part of being an executive where you have to act a little bit. And a lot of it isn't so much like faking things as just having like a really heavy filter over, things, because you're basically being viewed under a microscope.
And you're representing the company in a way, whereas I was always just a hired gun.
Exactly. So it's like, but when it comes to my own personal art and my own personal brand, it's kind of a different story. I get what you're saying about alienating customers, but what's funny is I've actually had to pull back from being political in kind of an opposite position. When I was freelance, I was like really political, like blatantly political. And I seem to get clients, and kind of make it work. But I can see, like, I wasn't making a living doing like the kind of thing you're doing where it's like monsters and robots, and that's kind of the thing. It's like, if you're selling prints of that, like people all over the political spectrum are like really into that.
Absolutely.
And so I can kind of understand the idea of not alienating them. I've also heard an argument, and maybe you can, this is something I think about too, because I think about this a lot, but I've heard a really good argument that's pretty compelling, which is, and I was reminded of it recently, actually, because I had a family member who was kind of like worried about walking around town because of the uptick in Asian violence, because anti-Asian violence, because, for anybody who doesn't know, like half my family is Asian. So, and my son is part Asian. So it's like, it directly impacts my life.
Right.
And so, it's hard to not be political when it has to do with like the health and safety of people around you.
Right.
And,
the more
and
personal
things,
yeah,
when political things start actually like directly affecting your life, because I live in a pretty red area of California, and that might actually exacerbate how political I get. Cause I'm like, another reason I might be a little more political too, is because I happen to be in a belief system where I disagree. I really believe in Christianity, and I'm also really horrified by a very large percentage of people who are claiming to believe what I believe, because I don't think their actions or their voting is representing what they're claiming to believe. And as somebody who's invested in that, like I'm very invested in that. It's really hard to like sit on the sidelines and just be like, oh, okay, let bygones be bygones. Because
you identify with this group or this tribe, and they're making you look bad in a way. You're like, this is not what we're supposed to be, everybody.
Yeah, well, it's not even making me look bad. It's just more like, if you are really into Power Rangers, and then you have a guy just spouting off some BS and clearly has not seen or heard Power Rangers.
Right.
Like, your blood's going to boil a little bit if they're claiming to be an expert on it. And that's kind of how I feel, where it's like, I literally am surrounded by, it's hard to explain, but it's like, I feel compelled to kind of speak up about it, because but I'm also a person who, like, I have a lot, I have a lot of trouble being quiet when I think something's wrong.
Right.
And it's like, it's really hard for me to be quiet.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
have this like artistic persona, and here's the thing. People that know me, like, I'm on YouTube whenever, like, what you see is not fake. That is really me. Mm-hmm. I just leave a couple things out. You know what I mean?
It's just a filter. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. What I do, I mean,
in
some way, what I do, there's a little bit of a character there, but I'm being real when I'm talking to artists. And sharing my experiences. That's all real.
Right.
Yeah.
There's, but there's a little, there's some showmanship to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's you're just describing professionalism, because it's like, like I said, in my workplace, I'm not fake. I'm just measured and filtered.
Right.
And it's like there's a difference between like wisdom and fakeness. Like that. The example I always think of with that kind of thing is like, like if your wife is wearing something not like the most flattering, and they're like, how do I look in this? There's a really measured way to respond, and then there's just the the cold, hard truth way to respond, and one's going to get you a lot better of a relationship, and the other is going to kind of potentially burn a bridge. And so it's like, in that scenario, are you being dishonest? No. Like if you care about the person, you're probably not going to be dishonest, but you're going to be honest in a way that's very measured and filtered and kind of through a filter, kind of considering the other person. So it's, I don't think it's fake, but I do think it's
like being diplomatic in a way as well.
Yeah. I did like Rick Remender's take on it, though. Like, that's one of my favorite takes on it that I've read.
I don't know.
Recently.
I mean, I know who Rick Remender is, but I don't know what you're referring to.
So he was being, he's very political in his art and in his stories and on Twitter. And on Twitter, somebody was critiquing him and saying, like, well, you've just lost a fan of, like, whatever. I think it was like Deadly Class or something. He's like, I'm not going to buy Deadly Class. And he was like, you know what? I got a better idea. How about anybody who has this political viewpoint doesn't buy it? I don't care.
Right.
I don't want your money. And he was like, and he also was mentioning the fact that, like, prior to being vocal about politics, people have tried to cancel him for years because he'd have, like, a conversation sequence in a comic where it maybe signaled a little bit that he was left leaning, and people would be like, stop buying this comic, boycott this comic. Like, so, but I think that could be a scenario where it's like you were describing, where it's like, maybe that's a thing that's easier to do when you have more fans.
I think, and I don't know because I'm not in that position.
Yeah.
But I think it's, in my mind, it's twofold. Let's say tomorrow I'm as popular as Rick Remender. The two things is, one, I have the fans / income to lose. Now, I'm sure nobody wants to lose money. Nobody wants the fans. But if he could still make a living and lose some fans, then that's less of a risk than literally like, oh, I just lost half my income because I lost, 20 fans,
Yeah.
And the other thing, which is a kind of a bigger thing really, is, again, he has a platform where, and I haven't really followed him. I know his comics, but I haven't followed his Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
If he phrases things right or makes the right argument or puts the right link, he might inform some people. He might change some minds. He might make 10 people stop listening to him, and one person might go, oh, you know what? That's a good. So he might affect change because of his base.
Yeah.
I know no matter what I say, there is very little chance I'm going to change anybody's opinion. So the risk versus reward is like, I'm not going to make the world a better place according to what I think it should be, but I'm very likely going to alienate some people that I can't afford to alienate, is kind of what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that too. I can definitely say from personal experience, like, there's one thing I'm very careful not to be. And for anyone curious, like, you can watch the stream, but it's like I was put in a really awkward position on a live stream. And one of my attempts, one of the things I'm going to be trying on this is, when I do live streams, is to not kind of shut people down. Like, I actually want
quite a challenge. It's for anybody.
It is. And it's been interesting because it's like, I don't have like massive views on it, but I do have some people who show up and like a little bit of a kind of culture building around it. And I guess like I'm starting to get trolls. And so, but once again, I'm not really interested in like shutting people down who disagree with me. And like, to me, that's a huge, like, for me, that feels like a rule where it's like, I don't necessarily need to hear everyone for like 5 million years and not or suddenly change my mind based on whoever comes on. But it's like, I'm pretty open to different views. Right. And one of the things that I found really interesting was like, this guy came on and he was like a total misogynist, and I tried to engage him and have like a real conversation with him. And eventually had to mute him because he was just reiterating and repeating the same points without like engaging.
And that's
what was just trolling.
I saw most of that, and that's part of what made me think of this, because I think having that policy is good and hear different points of view and not cutting it off. But I think no matter what your opinion is or how much you like, there's certain types of people on all sides of all spectrums of everything we're talking about.
100%
that are jerks and are closed-minded and just want to spew garbage and not hear what you have to say. And no matter what you say, they're going to, and it's not helpful to your side, their side, whatever. It's not helpful to anybody. And there's no reasoning with them. It's like they're just like shouting into the void, and you're the void that day. And so I think you did the right thing shutting that, because I saw it. And it was, there was no, everybody was trying to talk to them like politely and civilly, and they were having some kind of thing that there's no conversation. It's not even an argument. It's just it's nothing. It's just
that person. You know, I'll get a little into it because I watched it too, and I wanted to kind of comment on it. But it just seems like that person was very much in the victim mindset, and probably had been hurt or something like that, and then basically taking all his frustrations out on women. It's unfortunate, but it's weird because I had this experience a couple of weekends ago. So just the dynamics between gender and everything. But so my girlfriend, she was in the Army. She was in law enforcement. She's flown helicopters. She's done all this cool stuff. And so, she had an Army buddy came over, and it was me, my girlfriend, her Army buddy, and her husband, and we were just hanging out, and it was just really cool. And then I thought about it, I'm like, this is kind of a weird kind of role reversal, because here you've got the two females in the Army and everything, but it wasn't. I'm still a man. I still, it's kind of a weird thing. And it's like, and it made me think of that video. I was like, man, that guy, he wouldn't be able to experience this, or he would, he'd feel less of himself or something because of a situation like that. And
yeah, and like the thing is, like, here's the thing that I like about being open about political viewpoints and even open to discussion about them, even with people who I like vehemently disagree with. Like, it's like I actually am kind of sad that guy didn't engage, because I like the little that he did. It was pretty clear he had some like really rough life experiences. And it's like, I wonder how often that guy actually engages, like, and actually talks to like people who disagree. And to me, it's like, I enjoy that as part of my personality. I think it's also because I'm a bit, and I think Gaz, you and I are wired a little similar in that sense, because I think we like doing devil's advocate, kind of playing through, like explaining, like, rather than just saying like, hey, this thing is good, like saying, oh, here's why it's good, or here's why I didn't like this thing, or here's why I believe what I believe. Absolutely.
I agree. Like, I might still not agree with you at all, but I would like to know what you're thinking, why you thought that. Yeah. And when you get done, ideally to me, hey, maybe you changed my mind, but ideally the most likely outcome is like, oh, okay, I see why you think that. I still don't, but I get it. That's what I would like to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I feel like it does open this kind of realm of possibility. What I never want to be politically is an artist who's so vehemently political that it becomes like toxic, and that's a hard line to draw. But I can definitely think of like one in particular that I admire the hell out of their work, and I literally can't watch one interview of theirs. Because they're so toxic, and like it's and keep in mind there's versions of that are on like my side of the aisle too, and it becomes hard to even.
Well, you're in a weird spot too, because you're self-identifying as a liberal and a Christian, and not that the two are mutually exclusive.
Yeah,
I could see how often there would be some friction between the two sides of those. They don't always go together, but way.
Well, they definitely don't. I mean, like it, my experience with that, like I volunteered, Cenk Uygur was running my district and unfortunately lost. But I volunteered for his campaign. And I remember when I volunteered for it, kind of talking to some of the volunteers and stuff like that. And they just started riffing about Christians and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of a believer. And they're like, what? Like, what the hell are you doing volunteering for Cenk? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I agree with like, 90% of his criticisms. I just happen to like I tend to be a believer in the idea that you can like have 90% agreement with somebody and actually get stuff accomplished, as opposed to like 10% agreement, but hey, we believe in the same God or whatever, like I don't know.
As somebody who isn't religious, I mean, it baffles me that it is that way, because for Christians anyway, because when you think of Jesus, I mean, pretty much, I don't think he would have been a Republican. I think
it was the Dalai Lama, and I always misquote things, so forgive me, but I think the Dalai Lama had said years ago, like, oh, you've come to America, you met him, or whatever, and something along the lines of, you're Jesus Christ, I like very much. You're Christians, not so much, or words to that effect. And it's like, I could see that, like, because if you look at like what Jesus taught and what maybe not all Christians are doing, there is a disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of the belief system is that there will inevitably be like some hypocrisy, but it's like the level of hypocrisy is weird. It's baffling to me, and it is kind of a corner I've painted myself into by having a book that kind of addresses it and yet doesn't like water it down and make it like a Thomas Kincaid painting.
Well, to get specific about your book, like, again, I've only read the first half.
Yeah.
People could be offended by anything. People could be turned off by anything, but I find it hard to believe that any reasonable person would be offended by the religion and the mental illness and all that stuff. Like, it's first of all, it's true. It's your story. So it's not like, which puts a whole nother layer. If it was fiction, I still wouldn't find it objectionable, but it's not fiction. It's like being offended by the story of Abraham Lincoln or something. Like, it's just what happened, So I think anyone that doesn't like your book on the grounds of politics or religion, that's their issue, because it's upfront about what it's about. Yeah. And I don't typically read books like that. I read it mainly because I know you and I know you're a good artist. I'm like, well, let me see what he's doing. And I liked it. And so, and not just because I liked you, you know what I mean? Like, because I bought it because I like you. I liked it because I liked it.
Oh, thank you.
So I don't know where you go in the second half with it. Maybe you're going to lose me, but so far it's just a good story. And I like documentaries and I like biographies and things. So it's right up my alley, the kind of stuff I like. So I don't know, if something's true, I feel like it transcends a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's just tough because it's like, at least in an industry level, like in the process of pitching it, it's like I literally got a bunch of Christian publishers who responded with, we love it, but we like need like a 10 steps to a healthy marriage, or like the, like, and a lot of them want, and a lot of them want like, very conservative viewpoints. So it's like, fishing with Jesus or something, it's like,
right.
And most of them, even if they have a different viewpoint, they're like, curse words. And it's like, yeah, it's like a slice of life book. Like, what, people don't cuss in your world? Like, what planet do you live in? Like, it's just weird. So there's a side that of the Christian industry that wants things kind of padded and pretty, like, which baffles me, as people who like believe in like this idea of like total depravity in the world would not want to depict that. But anyhow, so there's that. And then I had a few publishers who literally responded with, it mentioned Christianity and it's not a loss of faith story. Sorry. I literally got that from some fairly mainstream publishers, and that was really strange.
It's weird that they would even give you that comment. Like, going back to being a little diplomatic, they could just be like, not really for us. Thank you, though.
Yeah, and it just seems so weird because it's like, I don't like, but then again, I guess maybe I'm a minority. It's like, I don't really view it as like an us versus them thing. Like, I'll read a good book. I don't care who wrote it. Like,
well,
I mean,
if they're like a convicted pedophile or something, then I don't need to read that book.
Going back to like the Bill Cosby thing, obviously there are lines that like I can't watch his stand-up anymore.
And that's something I talk about with my friends and stuff, that like in this age of information, social media, more and more, just in our lifetimes, it's become more prevalent. And I guarantee there are books, movies, pieces of art, whatever, songs that we all love.
Yeah.
And somebody involved in creating them was a horrible person that we would hate and would not want to know, but we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, because it used to be people would cover it up, or even before that, maybe just they didn't know. There's some guy that's a writer in a cabin and maybe he's killing people, but nobody caught him. And you know what I mean? So it's just this, we're in an age where in some ways it used to not matter so much who the artist was or who the creator was, because you wouldn't ever know really unless they decided to do an interview or something. And now part of how you sell yourself is by letting people into you and know who you are, but that's a double-edged sword. And so when you see people, again, it's different too. If you're in a political movie or if you're on a political TV show and this is part of like your career, like if somebody like, I'm gonna say Bill Maher, not that I'm a fan of his, but just someone I'm thinking like his career is about politics. It would be weird if suddenly people were turned off by it. But if you are an actor or comic artist, whatever, and your work has nothing to do with that, but you're always talking about it. And I don't think that's wrong. I think you're right. Yeah. But you have to acknowledge that you're taking a risk.
Yeah.
Of what 100%. Could happen when you do that. And so that's, whenever I see people talking, I'm like, good for them. And when consequences come to someone, whether I agree with the consequences or not, I'm like, well, you have to kind of expect that might happen because that's the world,
Yeah, and I think that's something I've considered too. It's like there's certain hills I'll die on, and it's like for one thing, because I live in a kind of right-leaning area, when I'm very public with my name and I talk crap about like Donald Trump, and this is one of the few districts in California where there's guys who like beat people up at Trump rallies, like locally. Right. And there's actually a pretty prevalent amount of white supremacists in my area. Like you can look it up, like look up the Antelope Valley and like Nazis. And it's like, it's actually, yeah. So it's like that in Orange County for some reason, like those two spots are like where like all these white supremacists like to hang out.
I laughed in the middle of that, not because what you're saying was funny, but I saw that Salazar Nation said the second half of your story turns into a slasher story.
It totally does. I have thought about that just as like a little, I mean, obviously the script's already written, so that's not where it's going to go. But I have thought it would be funny if like this is like a 2 graphic novel arc to just introduce like a sci-fi or better yet, like a superhero story where it's just like at the end he gets punched and like murdered by somebody, and then some like superhero has to come in and it's like, wait, this was a what? Right. This isn't a slice of life.
And then it becomes super basic and generic. Like after that, it's just like, I need to save the bank. And it's like, just totally.
I would actually love to do that sometime for a future story that'll take like 10 years to write.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So like, there's literal risks in my area for like saying and being kind of public and vocal about that. And I'm aware of those too.
Right.
But I'm also like, I don't know what it is with art. Like in my personal life, I'm not like a super brave person, but I also played a bunch of like anti-Trump songs at a bar where people literally get murdered all the time. And it was like a biker bar
where people get murdered.
Well, because it's a great seedy biker bar, and they had us play, and it just was a fun idea of like singing an anti-Trump song to a bunch of bikers who could murder me.
All right.
I don't know.
I mean, I appreciate the chutzpah, but at the same time, like if I don't know if you're being hyperbolic, but like
I'm not. I can I can name the
because
bar.
like I've been in a shitty band. I've been in a crappy band, and I've played terrible venues.
Yeah,
and they've been like trashy, and maybe somebody got hurt there, but I don't know. But if I knew going in, like people get killed here all the time, I wouldn't go. I don't need to go to that place. Just don't need to go.
Yeah, I don't know. It was fun, and it is a charming bar in a weird way. It's just like it's in one of the darker areas of the town, like, and a lot of people get murdered there. But
yeah, we are very different in this aspect.
But anyhow, so like that's a part of my personality that's weird, where it's like I don't know. When it comes to art, there's like a part of me that like enjoys.
But you also did that now with like a wife and child at home.
Yeah.
Because I might have done that when I was younger, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I did that at like 40.
Okay, no, and that's awesome. But I guess, I mean, I might have done things like that in my past, but like having a wife and kid at home does make me think twice. Because it's like, if I say something and someone shoots me in the face, now my daughter doesn't have a father. So that thought does go through my head. It's not just me putting my own thing on, like, you know what I mean? So that's why I say that.
Yeah, and like I said, in my regular life, if I'm like standing next to like a big dude who could like beat the crap out of me. I'm not usually going to like be running my mouth about politics, but like you give me a guitar and a band and like suddenly, I don't know, it's kind of fun.
Amount of invincibility kind of sort of.
There's also just a part of me that's just kind of like, bring it, you know, like I don't know what it is. But there's a little bit of like that with my art where it's like with this book, I knew it would be hard to market because I know the Christian market. And part of why I even felt compelled to write it is like, I want to write a good story that talks about Christianity. It doesn't preach to people. It's not like a chick tract. It's not trying to convince people. It's just my story.
Yes.
And like, I don't see that enough.
I think you did a good job with that. I think you hit the target you were aiming for. Put it that way.
You know, because I feel like it, you know, like I love Sunny Day Real Estate, and like, you know, the lead singer is a Christian, but like Sunny Day is a good band. Like, and they're a lot different. There's a difference between that and like Striper and like some crappy, like.
This brings up. I mean, I get your point, but in one of the comic groups I'm in on Facebook, and I can't remember which one, like Indie Comics Superstars, whatever, they all have the same name.
Yeah.
And there was somebody, and I see a lot of people talking about like very Christian comics or LGBT comics or whatever their subgroup is or their identity is, like a comic about that thing. And I never understand that viewpoint. And I actually commented on someone who was talking about how do I have this great idea. I want to make a Christian comic book. And they were talking about making a Christian comic. I'm not against Christian comics. I don't care. Make your Christian comic. But what I said, and a couple other people, like first there was things about just like have good stories. And I like Noah in the Ark or like, you know, that kind of, and I said like, don't make a Christian comic, make a good comic with a good story, make a good comic with a good story and infuse it with Christian values. And that way, because if otherwise the only people that will ever read it are hardcore Christians. If you are, you know, if you want to reach anyone beyond that group, then, you know, keep your morals, keep your beliefs, have your message, but don't have Christian man fighting with the Bible squad or whatever the idea. I don't remember what the idea was, you know. But like, just have a story and don't market it as Christian. Don't market it as this is what it is. This is who it's for. Just make a good story. And yeah, maybe that group will like it, but maybe you'll get it in the hands of other people that wouldn't look at it because it's labeled a certain way. And it always baffles me why people do. And again, I'm using Christian as an example because we're talking about it. But like with anything, I never, I might be misusing this term, but identity politics, I in general, as I understand it, refers to whatever that thing is. If I'm using it correctly, and if I'm not, please don't jump all over me. But as I understand it, I don't get it. I mean, I get it to a certain extent because some people feel oppressed or they feel like they got something they got to get off their chest, and I need to make this story about this aspect of me or the fact that I'm this or I'm that or whatever. And I don't begrudge anybody to do that. Fine, do whatever you think. But when I see that, whether it's something I agree with, don't agree with, identify with, don't identify with, I generally am like, I'm not interested in that because it's going to be a story about that thing. I know what it's going to be. You know what I mean? I'd rather a story that takes me by surprise. And at the end they go, oh, wow, I didn't realize how bad X group had it. Ooh, that makes me think differently than I like having that. But if you start off saying this is what we're about and this is who it's for and this is what you're going to learn, I'm like,
Oh, a perfect example for me, I remember was Veggie Tales. Like, so I'm not a Christian, but at the time when that series was out, I was in children's entertainment, so I was just picking up anything, and I came across it. I'm like, this is funny. These songs are funny, and and I'm showing it to my kids and stuff, and they're getting into it. We bought the toys and all that kind of stuff because it was good. Right. You know, it had Christian values and all that. But it was. I mean, aside from that, it was just a fun show, and it was well done, and it was funny, you know.
No, it's interesting. Oh, sorry. I've never seen that show. I didn't have a kid at the time, and but somehow I know that's a Christian show. I don't know how I know that. I've never watched it. I don't know anybody that's watched it, but I guess it's in the marketing or something. And that goes back to something like, why do I know that? Why would I need to know that?
Yeah, and like so here's the weird thing about that, like, because I actually agree with you, Gaz. Like, I think, like, first off, like, even my book like talks really openly about suicide, right? So like I intentionally started like page 1 about that. So like if I'm ever at a comic convention or if somebody's reading it, like I'm not fooling them into reading something heavy they're not ready for.
Right.
Like, because page 1, they're going to be like, yeah, this is my book. Like, you know. To me, I think it's important to put your cards on the table in the sense of like not tricking people.
Yes.
But
absolutely.
I also think it's like I actually don't like Veggie Tales.
No,
I mean,
okay.
I don't mind Veggie Tales, but it's like I actually do feel like it's a little too preachy. And they might do better just telling a story. Like, and they do a fairly good job at that, but at times it gets really heavy-handed.
And they had like other spin-offs, like there was like a penguin spin-off that wasn't, and I can see what you're saying, but I think if you want to introduce that concept to other people, I mean,
it's subtle enough, and it is well done, but it's like, to me, the reason I mentioned like Sunny Day Real Estate is like they legit were one of the most influential bands on Sub Pop, and they made a whole genre of music that like a million people ripped off like 10 years later. And like the fact that they were Christian was ancillary. It was like a secondary thing. Pedro the Lion, same thing. Like, or a really good example would be like The Lion King. Like, does anybody watch The Lion King and feel like they're getting a bunch of Christian propaganda? No, but like the director, the writer, all Christian. So it's like
there's a fine line there because the Chronicles of Narnia, you do get
so
it. Doesn't, not so much I can't watch it. I still like, but it's not so heavy-handed, but you do kind of, Aslan's Jesus, and like, and he was tempted, and like you kind of see it more obviously.
Yeah, but Lewis did it right, I think, in the sense of like,
but right on the line where it's still an enjoyable movie and it's still fun, but it's very obvious there are Christian themes, but not so much that it's going to turn someone off, because that's all there is.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings did the balance a little better, I think, on that front. I'm
going to sound really ignorant, but I don't think of Lord of the Rings as being Christian at all.
Oh, well, so Tolkien and Lewis actually were buddies, and they were in this group.
Buddies, but
they actually hung out at a bar, like
a murder bar.
Yeah, a murder bar. But they were in this group called the Ink Blots, and they literally, when they were creating works, were talking about how they could infuse and like talk about Christian ideals. So like Gandalf is Jesus, right? That's why he dies and all that. It's got the same symbolism. It's just way better done.
Right.
So there's and it, to me, I think, I guess my point is, I just think there's ways to do it that are subtle, and then there's ways to do it that are like, the other thing is like, it would be really easy for me to just go down like the Doug TenNapel route and just be like this brazen, like conservative who's just like, no one wants to buy my stuff because I'm a Christian, and then go on like what's Indiegogo and like, kiss the ring of like Comicsgate. But it's like, I'm not gonna.
Is Doug TenNapel the creator you're referring to before?
He is one of the creators, because I love his art.
Right.
And he's always kind of had that gimmick. To me, I think it's a gimmick.
That's a good point. He's always had that gimmick. You're saying this now.
Yeah.
I knew Doug TenNapel. He had worked on Earthworm Jim, the video game. And I remember playing that and kind of hearing he was the creator. And I maybe saw one of his comics at one point and kind of forgot about him for a while. And then I saw something other piece already did. I'm like, yeah, that guy's a good artist. And then a few years ago, I started hearing about like these crazy rants he was going on. And like, so it was this thing where he may have always been that way, but I used to not know anything about it. And I just thought he did a lot of cool art. And now I don't follow him, so I can't even speak super intelligently to this, but I've seen other people's reactions and stuff that like a lot of people hate his guts. And he pisses off a lot of people, and that's what he's known for now. Whereas a couple of years ago, he was known for Earthworm Jim and goofy stuff. You know
what's weird though is like, even back in the Earthworm Jim days, like I remember going to Comic-Con. This is like, this is before like cool people went to Comic-Con. It's when like Comic-Con was like just 90% men, and then like, most of them were either my age at the time or like, wearing sweatpants, and like about my age now. But anyhow, so we bumped into, a friend of mine and I bumped into Doug TenNapel, and he had this like independently published book that was like so-and-so the I can't even remember the name, but it was like basically the premise was like this Republican investigator who's the whole world is against him because he's a Republican. And you know what's funny is like he wasn't on Twitter. I don't even think Twitter was a thing at the time. But I remember him doing the whole pitch of like, oh, it's so hard for me to sell stuff, and like the thing is, the guy's a millionaire. He's not struggling. And that's where I'm like,
I don't want to defend Doug TenNapel because I don't know much about him, but what I do, I probably don't want to be defending him. But I don't think him having money means that he isn't struggling. I'm not saying he is or isn't, but if you're an artist and you want to create, you could have $1 million, and if you can't get your art out there, that can be a struggle. I'm not defending him specifically, but I just want to clarify that point.
No, I'd agree, and I think he's lost some opportunities because he's gone really like further politically than I would right or left, right?
Right.
But the thing is, he has a core base that supports him, that politically agrees with him, and to an extent, whether it's intentional or not, it's like that's his market. Like, so
that's a trap, though.
So it is or it isn't. And
no,
so
it is because I've seen this before with people who choose it or people who don't choose it, and then like, okay, I want to market to everybody. Oh, this group hates me now. Well, let me try to apologize to them. It didn't work. Okay, screw them. You guys are my real friends. And then it whittles down until you're preaching to this group of like rabid fans that believe exactly what you believe, and it reinforces your own ideas, good or bad, and it becomes a trap because you can't ever escape that. No one who isn't in that little rabid world is ever going to look at your work again. And it almost becomes like, what's the point of making your work if the only people that ever look at it are people that already idolize you and think what you do is right?
Yeah, I agree with that as a trap, but I do think there's a lesson from it, which is like, weirdly enough, like my response when people freak out about Doug TenNapel being brazenly political is kind of like, yeah, he's kind of been that way. Like it's not like a big shock because he's always been pretty openly that way.
Right.
I feel like even though I don't agree with him, I do think there's a strength to that, and like that is one reason why my public image is like, I don't want to shirk away from topics that I'm going to be forced to shirk away from later on because I have a client that maybe disagrees with like some core values of mine. This is like, and once you're in that position, you're kind of screwed in a different way because it's like, you know, for me, if like on YouTube, I become a superstar or something tomorrow,
I hope it's because of this video, because that I could ride your coattails.
If so, I'm going to be mentioning Gaz on like every other stream. But I mention Gaz all the time anyway. But it's like the thing is, like, if that happened and I was like constantly silent about politics, then I'm going to feel this weird obligation to be silent about politics because I've built a whole base off of it. So one of the freedoms that I find is like, I've talked really openly about mental illness. So if somebody like stumbles upon me and they're like, yeah, I don't really want to hear stuff about mental illness, like, and they freak out about it, like anybody who's followed my work would just be like, yeah, he kind of wrote a whole book about it. Like that's his thing. Like he writes about mental illness. Or if I talk about like being left leaning or disliking Trump, or I make like a design that makes fun of Donald Trump, you know, people could be like, yeah, he also used to do a comic that like, you know, for theroot.com that was like super progressive and used to make fun of Mitch McConnell and drew him like, and John Boehner, and drew John Boehner as like this weird orange dude. Because anyhow, the point being like, my political leanings are on my sleeve. So if I get a Republican fan, like they know what they're getting into.
Right. Well, and that's like, yeah, that's fair. I mean,
so like, there's a luxury to that too, but it's like,
and I think it also depends on where the line is for everybody, because and again, things could change tomorrow or next week. You know, we're all changing people. So I'm never like, I hate to say this, always be this way, but I have so far traditionally tried to stay apolitical and a-religious and a art related realms where people could see things. Even in this conversation, I'm trying to like really not go down any particular path. I'm just trying to discuss ideas.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that I think, because we're all different, they're like, well, I'm not political at all. Yeah. But if I post something, like if I post like Black Lives Matter, like that's so not political to me that it's like if you don't think Black Lives Matter, that and I guess even when we talk about losing fans, like that's a fan I'm willing to lose. Like if you think, you know, like or if you post blatantly like homophobic stuff And now I'm like, well, I don't think people should be homophobic. That's ridiculous. Like, to me, those are such absolute morals in my mind.
Yeah.
That despite trying to be apolitical, those aren't political issues to me. Those are just like, we're humans. We got to all take care of each other equally. Like, that's
obvious. 100%.
So I do occasionally post things like that. And after I do, I'm like, ugh, I guess that was technically political, but what are you going to do? You know, like,
see, like the thing I do like about you guys though, is like, you kind of have the option on the table. And I think it's a good thing for somebody who's like in a bind where and it's not a bind. It's just like, it's an industry thing. Like, you know, if, you know, like one of the advantages when I was like making a living as a freelancer is like, I had the whole threadless thing as a forum. So like people would go on there at the time. Now it's like so niched down, this doesn't happen. But like there used to be people who just would like buy anything threadless, period.
Right.
And so like you would have this audience that was just politically all over the place, buying your work, and they wouldn't have any idea who you were other than like, oh, okay, this artist made it. And then the people in the forums were like really connected to who you were. So it was like this really nice dichotomy where you had a little bit of separation, and yet at the same time you had this like really intimate connection. So you got like the best of both worlds, but it's like, I don't have that now. So it's like, I think the point you were making about like the robots thing, it's like, I think Attack of Literacy would do well with people who are like hardcore, like constitutionalists, like left or like right-leaning guys who are like, you know, because like they all consider themselves like literate, like book nerds, you know.
Right.
It would just do well with book nerds, like right or left, like people who like books. If I had to sell that myself, I might actually, you're right, with like some of my content, it might dissuade people who would otherwise buy it. And that's kind of a bummer, because like it's not like everybody's evil who has like a different viewpoint. But I guess my point is, I think it's cool that you've created a distinction for people and been pretty open about it, where you're like, hey, like, so on my Facebook, like my personal Facebook, you've been pretty open where you're just like, I'm going to get a little political and it might offend you. So if you're not into that, like, here's where to follow me. If you are into that, like, you can follow me here. And I think having that option is really nice, because then people who just sincerely want to follow the work can follow the work, and they don't have to be inundated with like, you know.
Yeah. And that was my goal, not to pretend I don't have opinions, but not to, because there are artists I follow that I might agree with all of their political, religious views, whatever. I might agree with everything they post, but like every other post, it's like, just show us some art, dude. Like, I agree, but come on, where's the art, you know? And so like, yeah.
And that's where I agree with you on like the identity politics thing, because I think good identity politics will have such a compelling story that you aren't going to care, like regardless of your viewpoint. And I think a perfect example of it is like Fun Home, which deals with like some pretty heavy identity politics, but it tells a compelling, like heartfelt story that like you could give to anyone, like somebody who vehemently even disagrees with like Bechdel's lifestyle might actually change your mind from reading that book, because it's so well written. And it's like, to me, I think that kind of storytelling, like with a strong plot, with strong dialogue, with like a good story, whether it's like autobio or sci-fi or whatever, you have way more possibility to change minds than, you know, with like some book that's just like, hey, I'm you know, this group, and that's what this book is. This is this group.
I will also paint with a broad brush that has many exceptions. So that's the caveat. But the broad brush I'm going to paint with is often those books that are so blatant up front with it aren't that good. Yeah, you know, like the art and or writing is usually very basic and pedestrian. And so, like, again, regardless whether I agree, identify, whatever, and this is why I say I usually don't want them, because they're not like a compelling read or an interest. It's just sort of like, oh, we're this group and we don't like this group, and here's why, and let's make a straw man out of them, and ha ha ha, and like it's just dumb jokes that it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, sure, I guess I agree, but who cares? Like, this is, you know, like.
I can think of like the perfect example of that. Like, so I'm a Christian, so I guess I'm allowed to like poke fun at this like more than like a non-Christian, but it's like in Christian culture, right? Like there's a movie that as an atheist, I found hilarious, and as a Christian, I find hilarious. It's like one of the worst movies ever made. What's up?
Does it star Kirk Cameron?
Yes. So it's called God Is Not Dead, right? And it's like it's the most straw man movie on the planet. Like it wouldn't appeal to anybody who's actually like gone to college, anybody who's taught college. But what it does appeal to is like these people who have this perception of like these atheists in college that are going to destroy your faith. And it's a tough movie to watch because like they literally set up the atheist character with the straw man rather than the steel man. And they make him like this absurd figure that's like out of reality, like not a real believable figure. And so it caters to the audience that's already bought in, and it probably made a crap load of money. But to me, as like a person who's a fan of just movies, it's horrible. The dialogue's flat. The only character with any depth is the main character, is the hero. Like he doesn't have any weaknesses either because he's the good Christian character. And it's like, that's a shitty story. And that's the thing that annoys me is like, don't hedge a crappy story. And we shouldn't, I feel like the industry, like any industry that's specialized, shouldn't accept like a bad story just because it talks about their team. Like that's a terrible standard.
I can make it even more generic and less controversial. There's a lot of good stuff going on in the chat, by the way.
Yeah.
I can make it more generic and less controversial. Well, controversial in a way I don't mind being controversial. How about that? What you're describing of like, oh, we're Christians, this is Christian, so it's good and whatever, who cares? Like, or we're, whatever. That reminds me of the people you see. I'm going to talk about conventions after all. You see at conventions who are not the best artists. They may or may not make a living as an artist. Their art is just kind of pedestrian and they don't have clients. They haven't worked for anybody. But they bank on, hey, everybody likes X. Everybody likes My Little Pony. So I've got every little My Little Pony, and it's badly drawn, but they know that like everyone that is a Twilight Sparkle fan wants, so they're banking on, hey, because it's My Little Pony, the community will embrace me. And I'm just using that as an example. It could be Spider-Man, whatever. And they're not bringing quality. They're not bringing anything unique. They're just bringing that thing the fans of that thing want to see. Yeah. And I think it's like I said, it's a much less controversial version of it, but we see those people at every con, and I'm not mad at those people, but it's the same thing of like, what are you doing here? You're just selling this to the people who are, and the people who are buying it are just like, well, anything I see this Ninja Turtles today, I'm going to buy, I guess. And like there's no quality filter whatsoever. So like that's the same thing, just amplified to a movie scale or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, there is a lot of good stuff in the chats.
Yeah.
Holy moly. Frank was saying, I thought he was going to say Left Behind. Perfect example number 2 there of like just terrible films and that kind of thing. I think your example, Gaz, is really good. I want to hear Scott's take on this too, like, and how he came to his position, because I'm suspecting there's probably overlap. And then Gary was saying, you don't have to announce I have these positions, but if somebody asks you, I want to buy your art, but first, how do you feel about abortion?
Oh,
I think you might have a moral obligation to be honest. Yeah, I agree.
That has never happened to me.
But I would be weirded out by that question. Like if I'm selling a picture of Godzilla and they're like, what do you think about abortion? Whether I want to be honest or not, I'd be like, what?
I think at that point I might be like, yeah, my art just may not be for you, like, regardless of what I think.
Yeah, that is out of left field there.
I don't know what it is, but like Corey and I were doing a stream once where I was talking about Christianity and like and some of my political viewpoints, and this person commented who is a Christian. I get like the worst comments from other Christians quite often, but it was like somebody who just like made this weird assumption that I was like hardcore like into abortions, like I was a big fan. And it was the weirdest thing where I had to like DM the person and was just like, I just don't like, that's a messed up thing to be public about with anyone, because it's kind of like a shitty thing for like, regardless of what you think about it, like that's a horrible experience for anyone to have to go through. Like, why would you want to like, that is one of the areas where I draw the line, where it's like I just think it's shitty to like rub that in a bunch of people's faces, regardless of what you think, because it's a terrible thing to have to go through. Nobody like pro or against is like a big fan of it happening, and especially people who are in the rough position of doing it. So it's like I don't know. To me, it's like that's one of those ones where I draw a line on public, because I just think like being public about that is irresponsible, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's irresponsible to like people who've gone through like pain and suffering.
You're talking about empathy. You're talking about putting empathy and care for your fellow humans above whatever your ideology might be. Yeah,
and I guess like to a weird extent, like I'm a little hypocritical on that, because like suicidal ideation is a bad thing to go through, right? I can talk about it because I feel like I can speak on it because I've gone through it. Like I've actually, been there. So it's like I feel like that's something I can touch on and be a little more responsible about. Whereas like the other, I can't judge that or talk about it. Right. I don't know, Scott. Speaking of crazy, interesting chat going on.
Right.
Yeah, I do love
question?
that. No. So like, how do you like? I by the way, I thought what you said about Facebook and like kind of trying to stop doom scrolling and stuff. I think that could be healthy for anyone, because often we'll just forget like the things that actually matter to us, like on a more local level, are kind of the things that are going to impact our lives quite often, a lot more than like national stuff. It's more like what's going on at your kid's school district. Like that's going to have more of an impact on your life. But anyhow, so I agree with that. But like, what sort of, when you were sort of deciding like how public to be, because I, as a friend of yours, like, and I will tell this to the, chat and stuff. I'm not going to tell you guys like Scott's political leanings or anything, but it's like, Scott is pretty open about his politics, like with his friends, like, for sure.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and this might speak to the lack of closeness between Scott and I.
Sorry, guys.
I'm not upset by that, but like I can make some guesses, but I don't actually know. Like I know yours, Josh. I don't 100% know Scott's, and I'm not asking him to reveal it now, but I'm just for a point of clarification.
Well, I spent a lot more time with Josh, so I mean, he did. I mean,
no. This isn't a competition. But I'm saying I've watched hours and hours and hours of Scott online. I've talked to him plenty of times about a variety of things, and I don't really know, and I'm fine with that, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way I want, unless but, and I don't always, even in person, I don't always talk about that stuff. But it's not that I don't have opinions on it.
Yeah.
And I've also found that usually when you talk about that stuff, it just seems like you're not changing, because I have very good friends that believe very different things than I do, and they're still my friends. And but when we get into those discussions, it's just like, why are we talking about this? Or in a lot of cases, we just agree not to talk about it because it's no use. And they're not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change their mind.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
I have a really good example of that. Like that literally happened like the other week to me. So I have a really good friend that I've known since like junior high. Like he was like the youngest of like my tight knit friend group, like 4 guys that used to just hang out and do everything, play music together, all that stuff. And has since went into construction and got pretty wealthy doing construction because he worked his way up in the unions and got to overseer, but he's very right wing. And he's moving to Nashville, and we gave him like a going away party, socially distanced going away party in a backyard of a friend. And with my other friends involved who don't lean politically with him, we were saying just avoid politics at all costs. And there was like a 3-second moment that night where we couldn't avoid politics, and it exactly what Scott is describing is true, where it's like it didn't really get us anywhere to get into it. It just kind of like everybody dug into their camps, and it's like that's kind of where we don't want to go. And I do feel like there's got to be a place where we can like talk openly about what we believe, but be empathetic when we do it, and kind of allow space. But I agree.
I think in a conversation between 1, 2 people, 3 people, there's a certain amount and real time that can happen. But online, if we're just in a Twitter conversation or I'm making a video where I'm just spouting, it's much less likely to be productive. Like, I mean, it's like you said, it almost is never productive anyway, but if it's going to be productive, the less people involved and the quieter the conversation is, the more likely to be productive.
Yeah, that's totally true. I love that. It's interesting to see where we're all kind of in different camps on that, but not like entirely different camps. It's just, it's interesting. I think there's benefits to both. And I think it's something artists should consider.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, here's the thing. If you build your career being totally open, like let's say you just go full out like R. Crumb, like Robert Crumb can pretty much walk around the world and be like, yep, like you like me or you hate me, like whatever. Like he can be whatever wacky, crazy business he is. There's a benefit to that. Like there's a benefit to that because you literally have nothing to hide. And there's a lot of alternative comic artists in the, in that era, especially the Zap guys, like who totally did that.
I also,
that's a route.
Yeah. When I, and no one will ever be able to find these comics, but when I first started doing, I did like fanzines and self-published comics and stuff. I did a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily, I mean, I guess it was, again, everything's political and whatever, but like it was a lot of weirdly personal, the kind of stuff 20-something-year-olds put in their comics, you know what I mean? Which I'm not, like stuff that I would never put in now. And I'm not like embarrassed that I did it because whatever, it's part of my life, whatever. But
I want to read those comics again.
They're not good. They're not good. But it would, just like, I'm trying to think of something I could mention. I can't, anything I would mention would defeat the purpose. But like I did those comics and, but I wouldn't want to live my life as the guy who did those comics. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to always be like, oh, you're the guy that, like, cause I don't do that anymore. And like, if somebody ever found one and brought it to me at a convention, like I'd sign it and I'm not gonna pretend I didn't do it. But like, I wouldn't want to be saddled with what I did when I was 24 for the rest of my life, as like, I'm that guy, like. Check out. There's so much stuff in chat. I know.
I just had a moment too where I was like really in the conversation, and then I just noticed this is the coolest chat ever.
I know. I feel like I want to respond to it, but there's so much I don't even know how. But
Chris did say this, which I think is interesting. He was saying if you read 2 stories, it seems okay to broach a complicated topic. That's totally true. Like one of the most interesting things to me has been doing interviews for it where like it's a rare moment when you do an interview and people are like, so talk about when you were suicidal, and you're like, oh shit. Like it's really uncomfortable, but the thing I've been enjoying about it is there's something kind of freeing about having a conversation that kind of starts off with like the most vulnerable topic you could imagine.
Right.
Because everything from there is very open and kind of interesting. So I've been enjoying it, but the weird thing is it also is extremely frightening going into that. And even the second it's brought up, like, most people, including myself, immediately have like this moment of like, oh boy, do we want to go into that? Like maybe we should talk about something brighter,
right?
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I have to fight that because I'm like, okay, my book is like directly hitting that head on. So I've put myself in a position where I'm forced to be vulnerable. And I think that's actually pretty cool,
And again, I think that's true and great. And I think it again comes back to the content you're creating as an artist.
Yeah.
If you did a book about a fire truck that was alive and solved crimes, and then they're like, so tell us about suicide. It'd be like, what? That's weird. Like
100%. Like, like there's a really good story about, do you guys remember like Blue's Clues?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that guy, Steve, like the main reason, his main motivation for quitting was that he was balding. And he was just like, he felt like there's a personal responsibility to these kids. And like, he wanted his character to be somebody who wasn't like affected by like aging and like out exterior things, because he felt like that would really screw up a bunch of kids and he'd have to explain it. And so he actually chose for the art, not that he's like against balding or anything, but just for the art and for the thing.
To be like a magical character that was always youthful as opposed to a real person.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at like Mr. Rogers too, it's like the way that guy conducted his life was very much backed by the art he was creating, and you wouldn't see Mr. Rogers going on like wild political rants. You know, he'd speak in front of Congress, but he wouldn't get political.
Right.
And I think that's because like it would just feel weird if like the Mr. Rogers neighborhood guy was suddenly getting in like these crazy political battles, you know? And he did some pretty politically bold things that a lot of people who were really political at the time wouldn't do, you know, with his show, just subtly.
Right. Well,
So
yeah,
it's like-
that goes back to what we said before, but he doesn't say, hey, it's political showtime where I'm going to teach you to deal with divorce. It's like, no, it's a fun show. And then one episode, somebody got divorced, and how are we going to deal with that? And yeah.
So it's like, I do think there's certain genres where it just doesn't make sense, but I also think like, I do admire the bravery of people who sometimes in shows like that are still like, yeah, I'm a human being and here's what I think, you know? But you're right about the risks inherent in doing it.
And I'll say, and part of the reason I want to talk about, amongst the many reasons I want to talk about, because I just find it a fascinating conversation. It's something people should consider for themselves, especially if they're going to be at all in the public eye. And I mean, at all, because nowadays you could have 5 followers, say something radical, 30 years later, they're like, hey, we know what you said. You know what I mean? Like, so you got to really consider it. But I do sometimes think maybe I should be more open and stuff like that. And I'm not planning on doing it anytime soon, but like I have thoughts of like, well, maybe once I finish the Horror 4 and that's out there and I've got whatever fans I have and whatever visibility I have, then I'll just start shooting my mouth off, you know, like who knows, you know, but I feel like, yeah, that's why I'm not making declarations about where I'll be, just about where I have been.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, so like the thing I'm working on right now is like a pitch and it's less, it's like a historical fiction kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were doing like a circuit of interviews for this thing, like if this got picked up, I would be way less political. You know, so I do think I think you're right in the sense of that. Like it can also hinge on the work, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's like if I was going on like a t-shirt blog and just talking about like Puppet Checkup, I'm not going to be like, and by the way, let's talk about suicide. You know, like you know, like so
that's more of a sock and shoe kind of chat you want to have there.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder because Scott, you know, you're doing Young and the Dead, and that's not like a super political comic.
Not at all, really.
Let's say you did a
only thing close to that it touches on are just because it takes place in the 80s. There's some comments back and forth about, you know, the Cold War, Russia, and you know, and stuff like that. But other than that, really no.
Well, I mean, a good '80s story can't not mention Russia, like regardless of.
Because one of my characters is Russian, and there's another character that's not too fond of her. So I mean, but they end up kind of getting along. So
love it. But yeah, like so, but if you were to do, I don't know, a tell-all graphic novel about Watergate or something, you might be a little more political in interviews. You know,
I don't think I'll be doing that, but sure.
I don't think you will. But I guess my point is like I do think the art that you end up doing can also inform. You know, like because Gaz, I totally get that. Like if I were doing just pure like a big chunk of my base was doing commissions of like monsters and robots and like B movies, like. There's really like it doesn't make a lot of sense to be like super political. It just doesn't.
Right. You know? Yeah. And it would seem, and again, it would seem to come out of nowhere. Now, there have been times in real life. Oh, and actually, one of the things I don't want to recap the whole thing, but I think it was Gary Hodges was talking about like him and Arzuki. Everyone's talking about the two of them went back and forth a ton, but part of it was he was quoting Kant. Is it Kant or Kant? I never know. But was saying that if you withhold, I'll quote him. He would probably say withholding your beliefs, especially to protect potential sales, is essentially a lie. I don't disagree with that. And the right thing to do would be candid and open and let the buyer face the moral dilemma of whether or not to buy it. I don't necessarily agree with that. So is it arguably is it a lie? Like literally? Yeah, I do think it is a lie of omission. It is a lie. And I'm okay with that. I don't feel like maybe that makes me a bad person, but I don't feel morally compromised or corrupt if I'm like, I don't want to share my views on abortion with the person who's about to buy my monster book. I don't. Is that a lie according to the logic trap that is built there? Absolutely, it's a lie. I'll cop to that. I am a liar, but I feel I'm being a liar. Is it just to protect sales? Partially, but the bigger point is, as some people discussed, like it makes no sense to discuss that with me. If we were online at the supermarket and I was like, oh hey, are those chips good? And you're like, well, first tell me, what do you think about the Democratic political candidate? I'd be like, what? No, chips are not chips, So yes, it protects sales, but more it protects, I don't want that relationship with you. I don't know you. I don't know why you're asking me that. It has nothing to do with this transaction. Yeah. Do you ask everybody that you buy or interact with what their views on a certain thing are? If you're going up and down the street asking that, I think that's weird, but okay, fair enough. But if you're just like, well, before I buy this comic, tell me what you think about Monsanto. It's like, just, it seems weird. So if that's lying, then yeah.
And then Monsanto, who made the comics, is just like, it's great. It's a great comic.
Again, if it's related to that, if it's about the agricultural industry, sure, ask me. That's fair.
You know what? They probably do make comics, but anyhow, because they make it like everything. I tried for like a month and a half in my younger years to try to avoid buying Monsanto products, and you can't.
Impossible.
So I agree with you in the sense of there's also limits because. Yeah. I can't think of a scenario where I've eaten at a restaurant and been like, what's your political viewpoint? Right. I can think of scenarios where I've walked into a restaurant, it has their political viewpoint broadcasted everywhere, and I've been like, bye.
Okay, and
I've totally had those moments.
Yeah, everybody has. I talked before about I learned certain things about certain artists, and then I'm like, oh, do I really want to follow them and make my decisions based on that? But they're choosing to broadcast that. So the argument is, if I don't choose to broadcast that, I'm a liar. Maybe, fine. I don't even argue that. I don't necessarily agree, but I'll take that bullet. Then I'm a liar. Fine. I don't care. Because the alternative is to just be espousing my opinions all the time, and no matter the situation, whether it's required or not. And is it protecting sales? Partially, yeah, absolutely. Because I am a capitalist.
I also think it's a personality thing because there's. Gaz mentioned this, earlier, which I think is great, where he has a line where there's certain issues where he's just not going to parse words,
Right.
If somebody's like, do you mind if I spend this money because I'm a Nazi? I think he'd be like, maybe go to the weird, dark web, because that's not really my clientele. There's a line, and I think there's a line for everyone that they'll draw where they'll be very political.
Yeah.
But it's just I think when it comes to parsing certain things, I think Gaz is trying to kind of keep that out of the realm of discussion. And I think that's true, because it's you don't owe everybody your life, or your political viewpoint. For me, I it's interesting because I can navigate that in a corporate environment. But the second I step foot out of a corporate environment, I can't shut my mouth.
Maybe that's
so that's part of my problem.
Maybe because you have to be so repressed in that situation. I kind of have a medium going all the time, whereas you have to be super tight, and then you're like, now I'm out there, baby, pulling your pants down, come at me.
But what's weird is I've been like that my whole life. The majority of why I got bullied as a kid was I just couldn't shut up. I am a person who I will speak my truth, regardless of the cost of myself, and for better or worse. That's something I've always struggled with. So it's I think that's why I tell slice of life stuff, because it's in a weird way, it's a medium where you can kind of get really vulnerable and talk about all the stuff you're not this topic. I love this topic. It's the best topic. I love the stuff you're not supposed to talk about at parties. Those are my favorite conversations. So, but
I'm more likely to talk about them at a party than publicly on my YouTube channel or in my work.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And like I said, I think it's kind of to each artist, and it depends on what they want to do. Like if you want to do, especially like all ages stuff, like you're gonna have trouble if you're too political.
Sure, yeah.
You just are potentially gonna cost yourself clients.
Yeah.
You could also gain clients by being too political, like get Kevin Sorbo in your movie and,
Yeah. I guess Kevin Sorbo, that great pull. Like, didn't think Kevin Sorbo was coming up tonight, but hey, the legendary hero has shown his face.
Yeah, Corey described it well. Deliberate deception isn't okay, but I think being selective with your topics isn't deception, it's selection. It's true. Like there's a difference between outright lying and just wisdom. And I think it just depends, it's like, I don't know, if you were dealing with like a company that's huge and the CEO of that company is, like in my case, like I've worked for conservatives. I've done stuff for the RNC,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like doing
so
it.
I did a caricature gig at a Republican convention one time.
Yeah, so I'm like, like at the RNC, if anybody had asked me, I would have been like, yeah, I'm a bleeding heart liberal,
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like, is it worth getting into that when like the money's okay? I don't know. It's wherever you draw the line. I've also like totally turned down clients that I thought were morally crazy. I mean, especially when I got fairly known in shirts, like I would have kind of crazy, very far right, like the fringes of far right, design.
I'll say
companies
this,
like want to hire me, and I'd be like, I don't want Nazi money, like because they were literal Nazis. So
I've turned down work from people that weren't even that extremely different than me.
Yeah,
Like, I don't want to do that. Not even where I'm like, you're a horrible person, but like, I don't want to do that. Like that's, so, but that's different than saying, here's all my views. It's like, hey, I want to work with you. And I'm just like, I don't want to work with you. No harm, no foul. I'm not, but just no, it's not going to work. And I have no problem with that because that's a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
And usually they're like, oh, okay. So like that's, again, you can turn down work without advertising what work you will turn down, I guess. Yeah,
totally. And I also think some of it's like, some of that has to do with where you draw lines too. It's like, like if I'm Mr. Rogers, is it disingenuous? Like, well, let's say I'm Mr. Rogers. Is it disingenuous for him to consider all these kids who don't give a crap about politics? And like his whole objective was to try to give, especially like he was trying to gear towards children that didn't have a social structure, to give them like a sense of being loved and being important. And same with Jim Henson, had the same exact objective. Like,
right.
And both
you
like
don't know what their home life is, what their parents believe. You don't want to get shut out of their life that you're trying to help because you think something their parents don't like.
Yeah. So is it like a lie for like Jim Henson to not just be like, I'm a bleeding heart, whatever, or I'm like a hardcore, what? Like, no, I think actually that's kind of wise and almost like loving what they're doing for their audience. So I think that's maybe the last point is like, know your audience. Like, I don't know my audience yet because my audience has to be, because I do slice of life stuff for my personal work. So it's like my audience has to be like this weird niche group of people who just like really dig like that secret diary stuff, like that's my audience. I don't know who that is. But I know they're out there.
I'm in it apparently.
Well, and I'm the nerd who's just like, when on Instagram you're doing autobio stuff, I'm like, yes, do it, guys, do it.
Don't get too excited. That's just a little side thing. But that's also why, I don't know. I haven't put anything crazy in there, but I don't like really advertise that anywhere. It's under like a different name because
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm not pushing that because it's just a goofy little thing I do, and maybe I do reveal something that I normally wouldn't. Yeah. Somebody said, Gary Hodges said, quoting Captain Jean-Luc Picard, a lie of omission is still a lie. Yes, but he was saying that regarding military conduct and there was an investigation and something wasn't said that was pertinent evidence. That's not the same. That's a completely different situation. I am a Star Trek nerd. I reject your premise there.
I agree with Gaz, because here's the thing. Picard is the ultimate leader, and a leader has wisdom in like what they share and what they don't. And there's plenty of Star Trek episodes where Picard has some like massively disturbing intelligence that he keeps from his team because he knows he can get the most productivity from his team. They will get through their mission, and he's not fully transparent. Like,
right.
Picard is like that master chess player of a leader. So he knew how to not say certain things that if he said it would destroy his team, because Picard was like the ultimate boss.
And so when he said that, it was very specific to that specific situation. Another, I don't know why I thought of this, because we're talking about Mr. Rogers, Jim Henson, people like that. An example, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and Peter Capaldi was the last Doctor Who before the current one. And in his previous life, he'd been in a bunch of punk bands, and he was in a show called The Loop, where he literally was just like, it was all politics, and he cursed. It was like this horrible. And when he got the role of Doctor Who, it is known primarily in England as a kid's show, even though a lot of adults like myself watch it. And I saw him in interviews with Larry King and stuff where he's like, yeah, I don't curse now because I'm Doctor Who. And he's like, well, so you're known for being this radical guy and you curse and do all stuff. He's like, yes, Peter Capaldi is, but children now see me as Doctor Who. I don't want them to see Doctor Who cursing or talking about this or that. He's like, maybe once I'm no longer in the role and a few years have passed, I will. But like right now, there are children who see me as the space hero. And I think it's irresponsible to do those sorts of things while I'm carrying this mantle. And I'm like, that's not a lie. That's noble. I think that's noble, like, so.
Well, that's showmanship, and that's knowing the costume you're wearing, and like half of entertainment and the industry is wearing costumes. It's like it makes sense. And there are people who are good at it and people who are bad at it. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. I think part of why I've leaned into being more open about it is I just, for myself, it fits my work to be more open about it. Absolutely. It also just like, I'm just really bad at, I'm bad at not talking about those things, because a lot of what I do revolves around those things. Absolutely. I mean, like one of the books I'm hoping to write in the future would have to do with like the church being misled by Hitler and like actually becoming like this weird Nazi church in Nazi Germany. That's something I want to write about in a graphic novel, because that was weird to find out that happened. And I'm like, how did that happen? I want to know how that happened. How did so many people like fall for that nonsense? And like, if I'm going to write a book like that, like I can't like steer clear from politics.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us all the way back to the beginning of the type of art you're creating might inform the type of persona you share.
Yeah. And I think if you were to like do a comic that was like more overtly about politics, or, and the neat thing is, and this is another thing that I think Scott and Gaz, you guys would probably agree with, is like, the nice thing about being more elusive about it is like the work can kind of sneak in.
Right.
Like inevitably when you write something, it is going to be political.
Well, and I acknowledge that too, because everything's going to be colored by your own views, whether you want it to be or not. And I think that's fine. And that's normal. And that's truth in art. But yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that annoys me about everybody flipping out, where they're like, Stan Lee wouldn't have liked this. And it's like, Stan Lee did long editorials where he's like, I'm doing this because like, like affirmative action should happen. And like, he'd just write this long editorial. And so inevitably, like there's meaning behind what you do. And it's going to pour out in your work regardless, Sure. It did for like the morals and the politics of Mr. Rogers and Jim Henson poured through their work, even though they personally weren't like bashing people over the head with it,
Right. It's funny because I've been watching Sesame Street with my kid, and
isn't that great?
Oh, I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do with her. But we were specifically watching old late 70s, early 80s Sesame Street. Because like I kind of remember a lot of it weirdly. Like I'm like, what was I 3 when I watched this? But I'm like, I remember all of this, But it's so experimental and radical, like the different animations. Like as an artist, there's a lot of really cool, crazy art.
Yeah, I used to love that.
That pinball machine animation still to this day.
That's not even the weirdest thing. Like there's just like experimental styles of like, this is like a piece of glass that somebody put glitter on. Like it's like a masterclass in outsider animation. It's great. But going back to the not beating people over the head with the morals, like obviously it's all about like, oh, eat healthy and there's the letter N and stuff. But there were scenes where like, and again, this is like the 70s and 80s where like there's a bunch of kids talking to Oscar the Grouch and then they move on. And one of them had like arm crutches. Nobody talked about it. Wasn't the point of the scene, just there. And then Bob's girlfriend is deaf. And so they're all kind of working on sign language. But she's just the character that happens to be deaf. And like, and it's all multicultural and like, it's all of it is very, very liberal and inclusive, but it's very rarely the point of the story. It's just, these are the characters that live on this street. And so we just show them and there you go. And so clearly there's a liberal hand there and a social progressiveness there, but it's not the point. That is not why people watch the show. They watch the show to see Big Bird and learn about the letter N.
And Cookie Monster, who he's so good.
Is he your favorite?
No, but like, what's funny is my favorite was always Snuffleupagus and then Bert, because I just think when Bert gets really mad, it is like comedy gold, like with that unibrow.
Turning together is very good. I'll agree with that.
But rewatching it with my kid, I was just like, holy crap, that's why Cookie Monster was popular, because he's so great. Like he's just the puppeteering in it, and when he eats food and the crumbs just fly everywhere, there's something magical about that. Oscar's great too. Snuffleupagus is the best though. But anyhow, I guess my point is, I agree with you in the sense of like, and those were decisions that I doubt were non-intentional. Like, I think they did think about inclusivity and think about politics when they were doing it, but they thought about a way to do it in a way that would like actually speak to kids and not like beat them over the head with like, hey kids, don't vote for this guy. Cause like, once again, know your audience. Like those kids aren't even going to the polls, like. And that goes back to what a while ago I spoke about the people that wanted to make their Christian comics. It's like, put your messages in there, but don't make it, Bible man. Like have a good story with good art, and then people will read it. And if there's some Christian messages that get filtered through, there you go. Like that's. Yeah. And my belief on that is like, if you believe what you believe is true, then truth isn't going to negate truth or lead away from truth. And so it's like, I think stuff that feels untrue or like dishonest or like manipulated, where it's like a chick track, right? Where it's like, dude, I listened to metal as a kid. It's like, I never like got brought to like some weird like witch hut and became like a Satanist. Like it just never happened. And then I had friends who were Satanists, but they were like joke Satanists because it just pissed off like weird Republican Christians. So it's like, I think there's a level of dishonesty about those, and it's charming. Like I would actually probably collect chick tracks just because of the like crappy movie nature of them. But it's like they're not good stories and they're not honest stories, and they seem like they're trying to sell you.
Which is kind of almost the same thing.
Yeah, and that's my point. Is like if you really believe what you believe is the truth, whether like you believe in like pagan worship or you believe in like nihilism, or you believe in like Christianity, or you believe in Buddhism or whatever, if what you believe you think is the truth, then like writing the truth. And it doesn't have to be like, here's the truth of what happened in my life. It's just some trueness about humanity or about experience, like which should be in everything, like fiction or whatever. You shouldn't veer away from that. The second you're veering away from that, you're trying to hide something or you're trying to sell something, and you're hard selling, which is the shittiest way to sell.
Yeah.
So, soft sell, tell the truth, just better stories, better customers. Yeah.
I could talk about this forever, but I'm also falling asleep.
Oh, that's true. Well, you got like my goodness, we've gone a long time. So it's a great topic. I'm sorry if I talked so much during it. I just like absolutely love this topic. So
no, I mean, I'm the one who suggested, so obviously I enjoyed this chat. But I was feeling tired. I'm like, oh, there's a reason. It's late for me.
No. And you were at that, like, Gaz is at that point in raising a kid where you need to take advantage of any minute you can get sleep. So thank you, Gaz, for coming on our show. I feel like we kind of hit the topic. Scott, did we hit enough of it? Do you feel like we kind of hit?
I think so. I mean, you could go on with a topic like this. You can go on forever, and who says we can't revisit it? I wasn't sure going into it what it was going to be like, but yeah, I think this is. I think we handled it pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I think I said in the initial thing, like, I wasn't interested in anybody convincing anybody of anything that they believe, but discussing more the general, and I think we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think once again, even those discussions are good where it's like an actual discussion, but I think, like, I'd agree with you, Gaz, in the sense of, like, that's usually a conversation better like one-on-one with people, or like over a beer and like dinner, than like, some kind of I don't know. But debates can be fun, and maybe we'll have that as another topic. Maybe it'll be like a debate Gaz versus Josh.
Nope,
Boom,
not me.
2.0. And then your whole non-political branding just will fade.
Exactly. I mean, I'll debate like nonsensical stuff. You want to talk about like who's the best dinosaur or what's the best sci-fi show? I'll do that.
100%. We should get into like we should do a hardcore debate about the War of Art.
Oh, because we would very disagree. But you know what the problem with that is? I would have to finish reading that book, and I really don't want to.
Yeah, shame, because then you might like it. All right, so so anyhow, I'm totally taking a cheap shot and just gonna call it. So, with that being said, Gaz, well, first I'll say you're on my channel. If you guys haven't, hit subscribe, hit like, hit the bell, all that fun stuff, and then buy 2 stories on Amazon. And I promise you, it's not like a preachy weird book. It's just super confessional and slice of lifey. So, and talks heavily about depression. So if you want happy clouds, don't buy it. But if you want just like an authentic story about reality, then it might be of interest. Gaz, where can everybody find your work? Where can they get the Horror A4, which is a comic that will give you mecha badassness?
I guess.
By the way, sorry, shots fired. I think
I'm Gazbot all over. I have my own YouTube channel. Right now, there's a ton of Power Ranger stuff on there, but I put a couple art vlogs up as well. I have an Etsy store where you could buy my prints, or you could buy the comic, and I'm everywhere. And if you want to see what I was doodling, I don't know what this is. I just did it on my. Oh, you probably can't even see it too well. There you go. Just some weird primitive monster man. I don't know. He's like a medicine man. I don't even know what it is. It just came out of my head. There it is. Not good for anything, but thrown up on Instagram later.
I think it's great though, and you guys should check out Gaz. Gaz put up a really good, like, he used to do. He and I were like the only guys on Facebook or on YouTube for a while that were doing like these weird commuting videos, and and he actually put up like a really good one that's like a journal and kind of documents like him finding time for his art amid like the chaos of not sleeping and in childcare and stuff. It's actually really fascinating and cool.
It's the video equivalent of a slice of life comic.
Yes, and it's also cool because it's like a little bit of a clue into the War of Art. So anyhow, I'm
gonna war your art.
All right. But yeah, check out also Horror A4. Just like badass mecha kaiju battles, awesomeness. Go get it. Scott, where can everybody find your stuff? And then how do they keep track of this madness? Because today's Wednesday. It's usually Thursday. It's on my channel. Last time it was on your channel. How do I keep track of this madness?
Well, like you said, Josh, first I will give myself a little plug. Just go to my YouTube channel. Check out Making Comics 101 if you want to learn the ins and outs of making comics. It is about 70 episodes long, or you can pick and choose certain episodes. But if it's a good refresher course for people that are already creating comics, and if you're new to comics, it'll tell you all the basic things you need to know. And also I have a website at circworks.com where I've got prints and comics and all that stuff. And like Josh mentioned, today's weird. Usually we do this on Thursday, but today's Wednesday. And sometimes we've changed things around. And you may think we don't notify people, but we do. It's called our newsletter. You can check it out. There's a description or a link in the description of this video. And if you sign up to that, we send out an email letting people know, when we're going to go live, who the guest is, what the topic is, all that stuff. Because YouTube doesn't always notify people. It's kind of weird how that works. But the simple solution is just join our mailing list, and we don't spam you or anything like that. We just send out, usually 30 minutes ahead of time, we send out a newsletter with a link, and you can click on that link, and you can find us.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Somebody asked me if I'm going to do 100 Days of Making Comics again. No. I will do videos about art and about the Horror 4, but I've done it, I think, 3 times, and I could safely say I will never do it again. Good luck to you who are doing it. But
yeah, I'm doing my 4th round right now. So
good for you.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm also doing 100 Days of Making Comics because I'm back working on Young and the Dead. So.
And you guys out there, I'll do the 365 days of comics because we're cartoonists. So why do we need this 100 days nonsense? Do it every day. Anyhow, also, lastly, I think there's one political statement we could all agree with, which is support indie creators. So,
yes.
Literally, like if you guys are watching this video this long, look in the chats. Like 80% of these people in the chats create indie comics. Gaz creates indie comics. I create indie comics. Scott creates indie comics. Buy indie comics. That's a hardcore political thing that's a hill I will die on, and I think we all will. All right. We will see you guys next week. And great topic, Gaz. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for chatting people too.
All right.